the Not So Casual 7-Point Sunday. It is September 25th, 2022. It is NFL Week 3. It is the Shark. It is the Gun. It is the Circa Millions Competition 2022 Top Plays, Hype, Conversation, and Analysis. It is Sharky Waters Nation. 9 words of lifestyle right the way we're get out of the water. We let that part play. It's the best part of the song, the best part of the drop. And we will turn the music off, throwing it to the Gun. Gun's Picks Sunday morning. What's going on, brother?
Man, feeling good, feeling great. I'm 18-6. That's right, 18-6 in the NFL. All my picks posted on this show and on Twitter. Plus 12.3 units through 2 weeks. I'm ready to cook. I'm ready to cash. Let's get it going right now with some prime time Sunday football. Let's go.
No doubt. And taking a breath, we go first off. We are going 1 p.m. We're going noon Central. We're going U.S. Bank Stadium in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Guns Picks. Minnesota Vikings come in here off a Kirk Cousins special on the road in Philly on Monday Night Football. A 24-7 loss, an obliteration, an insult to professionalism, but something that Kirk Cousins has done his entire career. He comes home in the division, catches the Lions off a win. An official play.
Listen, it's coin flip Kirk. I mean, you get the best of him, you get the worst of him, but he's bad in prime time. So don't take with what his performance was last week with a grain of salt, because he's going to come back strong here. I think this is a bounce back spot for him. Minnesota coming off that rough game. They're -2 in turnover ratio. Red zone, giving up a pick to Slay. I think Slay owed him in that game against Philly. Now they get to go play a Detroit team that's running a little bit hot after a close loss to Philly and then a nice big win dominating Washington last week with a plus 29 net yard average. And that's our average for against all their opponents as well. Minnesota, like I said, bad spot after a big win over Green Bay. Non-divisional opponent in Philly on the road in prime time. Kirk Cousins, not his best. Also, Minnesota 7-1 against the spread versus Detroit, and the home team is 3-1 against the spread. I think this is going to be an absolute bounce back here. I think the stock value of Detroit is way too high of a price for me. I want that to drop in other scenarios and other situations, but not here, folks. Minnesota is going to crush them. Give me Minnesota -6 as the play.
Yeah, we have full alignment here, and as I've mentioned numerous times, the Circa Millions competition is 5 top plays. Because there's 5 top plays in the NFL, there's not necessarily always 5 top angles to really gamble on yourself. So theoretically, the back end of the card might be a bit of a force to complete the competition card. I have 4 official plays today. The 5th play will be on the Circa Millions card, but not something I'm playing personally. That all being said, I said I was going to drop another official. We are live, 10:16 a.m. Eastern here on Sharky Waters Nation. Official play, Minnesota Vikings -6. A lot going on here. I made the comment in the offseason, major upheaval in the front office and the coaching for Minnesota. They hired a new GM out of Princeton. I don't know how to pronounce the guy's name, but I know he's an absolute mental wizard. And they hired Kevin O'Connell coming over here, OC for the Rams. Shout to San Diego State. Shout to the New York Jets. This kid was drafted by the New York Jets, I believe, in 2009. However, staying course. Going back to last season, Mike Zimmer shackled Kirk Cousins offensively. The locker room was flat. The team was inconsistent, and they underachieved at really a high level. 9 losses last year, 8 losses by 1 possession. We talked about this before we took them in week 1 against Green Bay. This is a bye team, and this is a bye team at home in the division. This game has particular incentive for Minnesota as well. Minnesota last year was the first win on the calendar of an 0-10 Detroit team. Detroit was solid ATS. They did not have a win. They beat Minnesota 29-27. I said it before, but Minnesota were those assholes. They will remember this. We gave them their first win, and not only that, we went 0-2 ATS last year against Detroit. A lackluster 19-17 home win, non-cover early season in week 5. A couple specific trends here to really jump off of, other than the fact that Detroit did just win a home game, and this is a letdown spot for Detroit as well. Go back to last year. Again, very similar roster groups, same quarterbacks, of course, coaching change, et cetera, et cetera. But Vikings last year were 3-0 ATS at home coming off a road loss. In week 3 last year, in fact, they came home off a road loss in Seattle and a road loss in Arizona and hammered Seattle 30-17. Slightly later on, they came off the aforementioned brutal loss to Detroit and hammered Pittsburgh with Ben Roethlisberger 36-28. And later on, off an obliteration at Green Bay in week 17, they did come home in the division and hammer Chicago 31-17. One final point. Last year, as we said, the Lions were a very above average ATS team. So they were coming off of covers very often. The Lions were 1-3 ATS on the road coming off a home cover. And they were 0-2 ATS on the road in the division coming off a home cover. And it's very specific stuff on their calendar. If you go back to week 1 last year, home cover against San Francisco, go on the road at Green Bay in the division, hammered 35-17, come home, cover against Baltimore, go on the road to Chicago in week 4. So this is early season stuff, just like it is today. Hammered again, 24-14. All boxes checked, Minnesota -6. Next play, we are going AFC, and we are going road back-to-back. Joe Burrow and the boys make a run to the Super Bowl, come back the next season, all of a sudden lose to the Dallas Cowboys and Cooper Rush. Guns picks, what's going on here?
Yeah, you said it best. Cooper, Robert, Rush. How about them Cowboys is what they say. And listen, I what I saw out of Cincinnati last week, take it with a grain of salt here, but in the second half, in the fourth quarter, you started to see that Cincinnati offense starting to cook a little bit, and they're starting to get down the field, getting points. I think that momentum is going to kind of carry over in this game here against the New York Jets, who actually made a dramatic win over the Browns. The Browns basically just came in absolute flat. Mismanaged the game, probably should have controlled the clock instead of trying to score a touchdown there late and cost them a victory in the process. So you got Cincinnati here hungry for a win. They're starting 0-2. They were down 17-3 at half, but they only lost 20-17. So that's kind of a carryover that I was just talking about here. Coming off back-to-back losses. This is a class. I mean, this is a classic new QB with no tape game versus a team off a hangover when they're on the road, favored. And then a team that wins in dramatic fashion that the Jets did. I wasn't impressed with the Jets in week 1. I'm still not impressed with this Jets team at all. I think Cincinnati gets their bounce back here and gets a big victory on the road here. -5 is a telling tale. I mean, they've been favored every single week this season, and they continue to be favored. I think they bounce back here against a lackluster Jets team. Give me Cincinnati -5 as the play.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. And as I mentioned, this is our 5th play in the Circa competition. I'm not financially backing it, but this is the 5th look on the card for myself, the odds fellow, who can't be with us today, Old Man Who Bets, and the great Fusini. And there's a lot of logic here. Of course, Guns talked about it. I'll talk about it a little bit further. You go back to last year. I made this comment numerous times, but the Cincinnati Bengals strike me as procrastinators. This is psychology. This is personality types. There's certain people that when they get an assignment, they go out and crush the assignment the minute they get it. And then there's other guys that say, you know what? We're pretty damn good. We can wait around a little bit. We'll get them when it matters. And I think that's who the Cincinnati Bengals are. They're the we'll get you when it matters type. So they wait around. And you see this. They're a poor first half team sustainably. And they did backdoor the season last year. We talked about this last week. But this team was 5-4 last year through 9 games with road losses at Chicago and at the New York Jets in week 8, 34-31. So you get a revenge game. You get a strong number. And as Gunn said, you get the Jets, who got hammered in week 1 against Baltimore on a similar figure from the same division coming into MetLife Stadium. And then last week was one of the biggest backdoors from a statistical standpoint in league history. 2 touchdowns inside of 90 seconds, a 66-yarder, an onside kick. Just insane stuff. Since he has to show up here today, they do have the added incentive from a revenge game. Again, 5th play in the competition, not financially backed myself. Cincinnati at -5. Next play, we're going north, but we're not going to Buffalo. This time we're going to the Boston area. Guns picks, a fan, a hat, a shirt, and an official play.
This is starting to become fan picks for me, but I'm telling you, it's not fan picks. I just think that the people are undervaluing this Patriots team. They're coming off back-to-back road games to start the season. They just got a win over Pitt, 17-14, where they actually dominated the game. They were plus 133 net yards for that game. They just couldn't produce the points in that spot. Week 1, they played Miami, lost to 20-7. I did touch on that last week when I did take the Patriots at Moneyline, I believe it was. Minus 36 net yards, minus 3 turnover ratio was basically what caused the loss in that game. But now you got Baltimore coming off 2 games. They're 1-1, losing in a dramatic meltdown. Speaking of meltdowns, we go to another meltdown that happened last week to Miami, 42-38, when they gave up 547 yards of total offense to Miami in the process. Baltimore's got a bad pass defense. They got some real issues in the secondary. They are not very good. They gave up 295 yards passing to the Jets, 461 to Miami. And that's going to kind of help that New England offense kind of mature a little bit. I think this is one of those games that, you know, they have a little bit of a lighter secondary, a lighter defense, which is kind of weird for the Baltimore Ravens in general because, their staple is their defense. But go on the other side of the ball, look at the Patriots defense. I mean, they've been playing absolutely well. They only gave up 307 yards to that electric Miami offense. And they only allowed 247 to Pittsburgh last week. Underdog is 7-2-1 against the spread in this matchup. And it's New England's first home game of the season. And they're sitting there as a dog against a team that is probably a little bit deflated after that dramatic loss at home last week. I think New England's defense is really going to give the Ravens fits here. And I think New England's going to be able to move the ball down the field and actually get points this time, which they've been lacking in the first 2 weeks. I know Bill Belichick, the wizard himself, will be ready for this one. He's always ready for the Ravens when they come into town. So give me New England plus 2.5 as the play.
Yeah, and you make some great points there. Obviously, when you blow the game in the fashion that Baltimore did last week, this is what we discussed with Cleveland. Of course, I did miss that cap. However, the game was pretty damn tight. That was definitely a bit of a coin flip cover there for Cleveland on Thursday night. But traveling on the road to New England, these teams haven't played in 2 years. The last time they played, Cam Newton was the quarterback of the Patriots. Patriots did get them in, I believe, a rainstorm middle to late season a couple years ago. And prior to that, in Lamar Jackson's first encounter with Bill Belichick, an obliteration, 37-20 Baltimore down in Baltimore. I wouldn't disagree with your angle. Nothing official for me there. Next play, we are going 1 o'clock Eastern, noon Chicago on a suddenly not so casual 7-point sharp Sunday. The buy hat is engaged. And we are taking Chicago at -2.5. It is -3 now. That is fine. A lot going on here. Of course, people say the Bears are terrible. Justin Fields, Ohio State, regional, overdrafted, can't pass, all this stuff. However, I draw you back to last week. We suggested Green Bay would hammer them on an inflated line. Green Bay was coming off of an abysmal showing on the road. Green Bay had to show up there. That was more so on Green Bay bringing their A game in week 2. Now you come back and you get a really lackluster environment here. Davis Mills and the Houston Texans, who somehow find themselves 2-0 ATS. And this is a league trend. The Texans are 2-0 ATS, the Falcons are 2-0 ATS, and the Lions are 2-0 ATS. So when the bottom feeders are sweeping the ATS window in the first 2 weeks, this is great fade material. Houston also comes on a road back-to-back sequence off a gritty yet poorly played game in Denver, and prior a cover inside of the division at home against the Colts. This is situational stuff. Colts week 1, Matt Ryan, first game with Frank Reich on a new team, uncomfortable, scheme was off, tried to backdoor in the fourth quarter, fine. Houston is sustainably good in the division at home. Week 2, we saw this. We lost this bet last week. Denver is setting time backwards with their offensive scheme in the red zone. Russell Wilson looks confused. Nathaniel Hackett may be a lame duck head coach already. 9 points for Davis Mills and the boys. I said this last week. That is now the 5th game Davis Mills has played outside of the division on the road. The points scored in those games, 0, 2, or 0, 3, 5, 7, and 9. They do not score the football on the road outside of the division. And one final point. Last year, the Bears were home favorites 3 times. They were 3-0 ATS, and some of them were fairly impressive. The aforementioned procrastinating Cincinnati Bengals came in there in week 2. Chicago was a favorite in that game, and Chicago did win the game 20-17 on a -2. Slightly later, against Detroit, which is probably more applicable to this, Detroit was a bottom feeder last year, like the Texans. Same line, -3, and Detroit did lose that game to Chicago 24-14. And then way later on, against the Giants in week 17, Chicago was laying 6.5 points, and they did beat them 29-3. I think this will be a defensive battle. The line's 39. It's low. I think Chicago gets there tonight by 4 to 10 points officially. Next play. We are going Lucas Oil Stadium, and we find a Colts team coming in here 0-1, lackluster at best, obliterated on the road last week, catching the Chiefs. The Colts opened at +7, now 5.5. Guns picks. What's going on here?
Listen, you may think I'm crazy for backing the Colts after what you've seen in the first 2 games of the season. I mean, but you got to look at the situation for these Indianapolis Colts and coming off back-to-back divisional road games, which is very tough. First, they had to go play in Jacksonville, which is probably the hottest place on the planet. The last place you want to go is on the road into a Florida situation in September. It's the worst spot for any road team. So you have Indianapolis coming off back-to-back. They got absolutely demolished by the Jacksonville Jaguars last week. Now they get their first home game of the season, and look who they have to play. Pat Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. This is a big circle game for this team, folks. Now you have Kansas City. Look at the situation they're coming on. Big-time home divisional win in prime time Thursday night, 27-24, even though they lost the net yardage battle, -82 net yards in that game. Now you got Indianapolis really steps in it. And it's basically due to turnovers. They're -1 turnover ratio versus Houston in the tie, and they were -3 turnover ratio versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. So if they can control the ball, take care of the football, this team is a lot better on paper than what is shown here. Now you got KC sitting here in a potential, what I call a sandwich. If you know what a sandwich is, they're coming off a big, huge divisional win over the LA Chargers. And now who do they have coming up? Mr. Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Bucks on the road next week. So it's a potential look ahead, pass through type of moment. I think this game is going to be a lot closer. I think Indianapolis's defense is not that bad. Look, they're holding their opponents to 2.7 yards per carry on the ground. You make KC a little bit more heavy on the pass on this one. It could be one of those games. And also look at Indianapolis. Who do they have? Jonathan Taylor in the backfield. If they can give him the ball, KC gives up 4.7 yards per carry on average on the road. So looking at this situation, spot is perfect for the Colts to take. And I think the public is going to really try to dump on the Chiefs after what they saw last week. So I think this is a perfect spot to go and take Indianapolis. I got them at +6.5. I know Mr. Shark here got a better number than I did, but I'll take them at +6.5 all day long. Give me the Colts +6.5.
Yeah, I did. And I posted this, I believe, on Monday night. I was really looking to the board early because I do know in NFL football, of course, we saw this yesterday in college football. We did not run particularly well on very tight lines yesterday. That's why you stay the course in sports betting over 365 over decades of action, because sometimes you're just going to get unlucky in small windows. We stay the course. We're at +7, +5.5. Jay Money said this. He thinks that the Colts will win the game. I wouldn't necessarily disagree. This is a must-win game, and this is a peak motivation spot. And it's an environmental shift. And I do think this is something that people may or may not really connect with when they're evaluating games. There's a major difference in NFL football from a game in Jacksonville in the heat on the road against a pissed off divisional opponent and a home game with your crowd in a dome for a quarterback who played his entire career in a dome. This is not going to be the same team this week. And you look at the line, look at the steam. This is sharp action. Sharps are not giving away money. They're looking at these exact angles, and it's very important stuff. And as Guns mentioned, this is the ultimate sandwich spot, probably in the entire calendar for the Kansas City Chiefs. You open up on Sunday, September 11th at Arizona, absolute obliteration, 44-21. Then you come home on Thursday night. Competitive game, which is always the case in the division against Justin Herbert and the Chargers. So you're off 2 consecutive highs. Now you go to an 0-1 Indy team. And as Guns mentioned, you come back the next 2 weeks, prime time Sunday night against Brady and the Bucks, then Monday night football at home in the division against the Raiders, then big dog status, 4:25 p.m. Josh Allen comes back in to Kansas City in week 6. Buffalo, Kansas City, probably the best regular season on the entire calendar this year. Then they go to San Francisco for another playoff style game before their bye. So they open the season weeks 1 through 7, 2 big games, 4 big games, 1 random road game in between. This is a sandwich spot, and it's really what you're looking to buy. And we talked about this going back to last week. Matt Ryan on the road in week 1 at Houston. Lovie Smith game 1, bump for the group, and Houston playing well in the division at home. All boxes checked. Indianapolis Colts +7, +5.5, 1 unit. Going to Green Bay on the road later at 4 o'clock. Guns Picks is taking Aaron Rodgers in Florida, which may be an adventure. Guns Picks, adventurous or sharp? Talk to me.
Listen, this is a double revenge spot for the Green Bay Packers here. So they're coming off a win over the Bears, which they basically do every single year. So it's not a surprise when you see Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers demolish the Chicago Bears. But Tampa Bay's coming off a really emotionally charged game. I mean, they won 20-10 over the New Orleans Saints, and I think that was a quadruple revenge game for Tom Brady because he really struggles against the Saints. Minus 48 net yards. It was absolutely a lackluster offensive event altogether, but they are +4 in turnover ratios because Jameis Winston went back to Tampa Bay Jameis Winston and threw a ton of picks in the second half. But this Tampa offense is unimpressive altogether. I mean, they're only averaging 192 passing yards per game so far this season. And with that wide receiver core banged up as it is, they're not going to have Mike Evans because he got suspended during a fight. So he's not going to be playing in this game. So they're already losing weapons on the wide receiver core. Their offensive line's banged up. Their defensive line's banged up. It's not the best spot in ideal. And also look at Tom Brady, what he's done this season. 2 touchdowns. He's only thrown 2 touchdowns in 2 weeks. That's kind of like, what the hell's going on? Are you just getting too long in the tooth? You're 45 years old. Maybe it's time to hang it up there, son. My 82.8 QB rating as well. Now Green Bay coming off a big win, divisional rivalry in a primetime bounce back after getting crushed by the Minnesota Vikings. They were plus 186 net yards in that game versus Chicago. So their defense actually improved. And I mentioned double revenge factor. The last 2 times these 2 teams meet was 2020, where Green Bay lost 31-26 at home in the playoffs, where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers went and won the Super Bowl. And then the next season, which was in the same year, they got demolished 38-10 on the road, just like this spot here. Now you have a Tampa Bay team banged up all the way around. You're missing Mike Evans off an emotional win. And then you have the Green Bay Packers in a double revenge spot. Don't think they won't remember what happened in 2020, and don't think they won't be coming out here absolutely strong because Green Bay is 9-3 against the spread after an against ATS win. So with all that being said, I'm taking Green Bay money line plus 102 as the play.
Yeah, and I think this is a tough game for me. Obviously, you see it at about a pick 'em that's suggesting this game will be tight. I do think you're making good points. Obviously, you get a double revenge game. As you mentioned, in the regular season, the only time these teams have met with Brady and the Bucs, 38-10. Complete blowout. And if you're ever going to fade the Bucs, you would fade them now without Julio Jones, Mike Evans, and Godwin, of course, the slot receiver. So this is probably a sharp look. For me, this is a tough game. I won't be on it. Next play, my top play of the week. We are going Carolina. We are going divisional. We are taking the Carolina Panthers +3 now, 2.5, 2 unit special. A lot going on here, but you have to really look at what's going on with Carolina. I said this last week, and I said this the previous week. They're going to be in a lot of tight games this year. It's just how they're weighted in terms of their talent versus the rest of the league. And it's also symptomatic of Matt Rule and Baker Mayfield and this group. However, when you find a team that's 0-2 and 0-2 ATS, and both ATS losses were by razor sharp margins, taking the name off the uniform, it just becomes a default buy spot from a statistical manner in the law of averages. And then you go a little bit deeper and you see what's going on here. You get a divisional revenge game. Late season last year, New Orleans did beat them 18-10 at home. The line there was New Orleans -7. Line functionality within the division does matter. When this opens at 3, it should be 4. This does matter. It's short by 1 point. And you go back to early season last year, the only time Jameis Winston played against the Panthers last year, On the road early season, Sam Darnold was the quarterback. Matt Rule was the coach. A blowout, 26-7. And ultimately, this is an absolute desperation spot. This team cannot start 0-3. You look at what New Orleans did in week 1 at Atlanta. Atlanta is far more lackluster than Carolina. They barely got there. They were down the entire game. They were unimpressive. And then last week against the Bucks, who of course Guns Picks just detailed as being very down right now, the Bucks weren't great. The Saints were imminently and noticeably worse on both sides of the ball, particularly the offensive side of the ball. I think Carolina gets there today. I think Carolina could really hammer them today in what really is a psychological and numerical box checking spot. We're on Carolina at +3, 2 units, 2.5. I wouldn't talk you off. Let's dominate. Let's stay at 1 o'clock, Guns. We're going to run through a couple.
One quick point here on talking about the Saints game here. So Sam brings up a good point. The Saints got the London game next week. So it's kind of like one of those spots that, you're thinking about, oh, I got to go to London next week. I got to go travel. It's a whole different mindset. So it's a very tricky spot for the Saints here. And yeah, it hits the divisional home dog system too, which is 25-6-1 against the spread. Perfect spot. I like it too. I like the Panthers there. So
yeah, I mean, that was the first one that stood out to me on Monday night when I was looking at it. And that's why we made it 2 units, and that's why we dominate. And let's go. It is Shark Waters Nation. 9 words of lifestyle. Ride the wave. We're out of the water. Staying course here. We got a couple more games at 1 o'clock, unofficially, but we do want to go through them. 1 o'clock, Fox Sports, Nissan Stadium, Nashville, Tennessee. You get 2 teams with playoff aspirations coming in here. 0-2 on the campaign. You get Tennessee Titans coming in here off just a massacre on the road on Monday night in Buffalo, which I think obviously we had officially. We expected that to happen. And you get the Raiders coming in here off really 2 brutal losses, giving the game away last week in the final play to Kyler Murray, who apparently can't be tackled by anybody in the world we live on. And the previous week, a loss, which was a revenge game within the division to the Chargers. Both tight, both competitive. Maybe not representative of how good the Raiders are, or I should say how bad they are. I think Arizona, that game played right to the average. And the previous week, Chargers are probably a playoff team. So the Titans are down this year. I mentioned this before. Julio Jones is gone. A.J. Brown is gone. Derrick Henry is slightly more fatigued. There's 1 extra year of wear and tear. Mike Vrabel, potentially a lame duck coach, I would say. I hate to say that for a guy that's obviously shown quality, but I do think this team was so stacked on young talent for a while that he didn't really have to do a whole lot. And of course, they did burst on the scene a couple years ago with a road playoff win at the aforementioned Lamar Jackson. However, today in conference, out of division, hosting the Raiders. Guns, couple comments.
I mean, yeah, you have the Raiders coming off just an absolute brutal beat. I mean, they had the lead. I think it was like 23-7 or something like that in the fourth quarter. And then all of a sudden you see an absolute explosion of the Cardinals offense, and they just carry that over into overtime and win the game outright. Really tricky spot here for Tennessee, coming off a short week, an absolute beatdown they took from the Buffalo Bills. I think this team's gotten a little bit more one-dimensional, and they've kind of relied on Henry to get on his back, and that's not really the style that they're used to playing. It used to be a little bit more balanced. They used to be able to get the ball to A.J. Brown and those receiver core that they love to do off play action. It was very remedial offense, in my opinion. But coming into the spot, it's to me, I think it's more of a bounce back spot for Tennessee than it is for the Raiders. After getting a deflating loss at home, and then you have to go on the road to go play Tennessee. It's a little bit of a spot where you could still come out flat. I mean, if there's any lean, I'm not making it official or anything like that, because I think these 2 teams are bad right now. I would probably lean first half Tennessee off the bounce back of getting crushed by Buffalo. So that would be the way I would go. But no official play for me on that one.
Yeah, I don't dislike that. We talk about this all the time in all different sports, how road to home and vice versa, the half-to-half game flow will reverse itself. So when you see Oakland, or I should say Las Vegas, how dare I say Oakland? When you see Las Vegas come out and really play a great first half last week in their home opener, oftentimes that does translate to a flat first half the next week. It's psychological. It's partially because they say to themselves, hey, we blew our load in the first half last week. We couldn't win the damn game. Let's chill out a little bit. And second of all, it's also just purely the environment. Home stadium, huge energy in Vegas. Now you go on the road, Nashville, hostile environment, cold, uh, grass. I mean, this is Leatherhead style football. This is not exactly where Derek Carr and the boys function at their best. I agree with you. I think the Titans, in some capacity early, could be a good look here, but nothing official. Next one at 1 o'clock, we're going NFC East. We're looking at this game. We're looking at the Commanders here, plus 6.5 against the Eagles. Eagles come in here 2-0, 1-1 ATS, did melt off week 1 at Detroit in epic fashion in the fourth quarter to not cover after dominating the game for about 45 to 50 minutes. They come in here, divisional game, Commanders, new quarterback, double revenge game going back to last year. Guns, picks, comments.
I mean, in these situations, I always like to fade the team that actually came out and exploded in prime time, especially with the Eagles. The Eagles, I mean, just absolutely dominated a really good Minnesota Vikings team that the Kirk Cousins factor in prime time still exists and is still a bad play. But you have the Commanders really off of what I consider 2 lackluster games, even though they did win against the Jacksonville Jaguars at home week 1. They really were unimpressive last week versus the Detroit Lions. And I see this line sitting here at like 6.5, 7, depending on what books you get it at. That line I thought would be if it was a play on the Washington Commanders, the Commies, or whatever you want to call them, I would think this line would probably be sitting at 4 or something a little bit lower. But you're seeing an away favorite sitting at minus 6.5, and it's just one of those situations that it could go one or two ways. It could go either the Eagles absolutely demolish them, or you could actually see the Commanders come out and win outright. I mean, it is a double revenge game, like you said, but it's just not a play for me, and I just can't trust Carson Wentz. I don't know what Carson Wentz I'm going to get week to week. Am I going to get the good one, the bad one, or the different one? And it's a situation that I don't want to put myself in. I just want to kind of study and get the data and see where this team goes in the future. But right now, it's a pass for me. But also, put it in perspective, it does fit the home divisional dog system, 25-6-1. Take that into account, but it's not a play for me. I can't trust the Commanders right now.
Yeah. And I think, you mentioned the line. As I mentioned, obviously, pro football is not NBA basketball. You get 18 weeks, you get 17 games. Anything can happen. And I think that's a snapshot to NFL football. The best athletes on the planet, bigger, faster, stronger, smarter, on a very small field, if we're being honest, versus their speed, size, and strength. This is why NFL football, I said it in our group chat the other night, and I think my guy Joe's Picks, shout out to you. You weren't necessarily connecting with what I was saying. It's scattered chaos always. There's too much speed and strength on a small field, which means it's craziness at all points in time. It's rare you're going to find a team that comes out and wins the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter. It's a game of runs because it's the top athletes on the planet, and they're just going nuts. And that all being said, if you go back to last year, I think the sharpness of this line is really integrated into what happened last year. Last year, you look at what happened in Philadelphia. Philadelphia did win the game 27-17 on, you guessed it, -10 push. Then it came back on the road, -6. Final score, 22-16, right within a field goal of the number. So when you look at this, when you win 20-16 on a 6 and it comes up to 6.5, what books are telling you here are two things. One, when Philadelphia plays Washington, we know their average very well, and they're telling you this line is leaning a half point to Philadelphia. And I think Philadelphia is a bye team. Philadelphia, second or third year young head coach. I don't know his name off the top of my head, but Jalen Hurts. I think Jalen Hurts is a great cross section of blue chip prospect, but also disrespected. It reminds me of Cam Newton to a degree. Cam Newton was the backup to Tim Tebow at Florida. And then he got basically ostracized and some stuff happened. He found himself at Blinn College before winning a national title at Auburn. Jalen Hurts did not have to go down to community college, whatever level that is. But he did lose his starting job with Alabama on a national stage in the national title game to, of course, now Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. And I still haven't pronounced his name correctly. No disrespect. I think he's a hell of a fucking player and human being. But I think this is compounded into the mental makeup of Jalen Hurts. When you find a guy with this level of talent, just like Cam Newton, that is disrespected, Now he's taken it out on the league. It's the perfect storm. And I think it's the beginning of his window, the beginning of his arc, where, again, just because he had a good game and they blew out the Vikings doesn't mean a really pissed off young quarterback is not going to come right back out in the division in week 3 and ball the hell out. If I had a free play here, I am laying it with Philadelphia. I do think this is going to be sharp, however. And speaking of championship quality and big ball shit, let's talk about this game in Miami tonight. We got Miami coming in here 10-1 in their last 11 games. And we get our guys, Josh Allen, I'll say it again, campaign 5, traveling on the road off just blowout wins in the first 2 weeks. Divisional game, Miami got hammered twice last year, including a 35-0 blowout at the hands of the Bills early season. They come home off a ridiculous win. Mike McDaniel, the head coach, I said, who is this guy in the post game? I don't know. Guns picks. Do we know anything here?
I think Mike McDaniel is playing chess while everybody's playing checkers. I mean, he's treating the NFL like a goddamn Madden game right now. I mean, I'm so impressed with this kid. I basically got him all completely wrong. That kid is an absolute genius, especially on the offensive end. He's got great weapons. This is a great spot to take Miami. I know they're playing the Bills. I know they're the perennial favorite, but everybody keeps pounding that into everybody's head, whether it be ESPN, whether it be Fox, whether it be any beat writer. They're basically saying already buying their tickets to the Super Bowl and saying the Bills are going to win the whole thing. I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think this is a very strong team, but this is one of those situations. You're coming off a short week. You absolutely pounded an opponent, and I believe it was a revenge spot, if I'm not mistaken. Absolutely crushed them in prime time. Now you got to go on the road into Miami. It's going to be like 90-something degrees and the humidity, and the sun basically hits you on the away side. It's going to be a brutal, absolute slugfest of a game for this Buffalo team. And if they're able to come out of this game and actually beat the piss out of them, I will be absolutely shocked here. The line's sitting at 4.5, 5. I almost put it on my card because it did hit the divisional road system, divisional home dog system. And I really like this Mike McDaniel guy. I can't keep fading this guy anymore because he's just going to absolutely crush my bank account. So, I mean, if there's a play, I almost made it official. I think Miami actually wins this game outright at +4, +5 here. I mean, if there's any spot to get off the Buffalo wagons as they're circling, this might be the spot, especially on the road in the heat on a short week.
Yeah, this is tough. I mean, this is a tough game, but it's worth discussing. Obviously, you made numerous points to Miami. I'll make a couple for Buffalo. If you look at Miami week 1 at home against the Patriots, we said this in week 1. The Patriots just do not play good football in Miami historically. Of course, it was Tom Brady, it's Mac Jones, it's Bill Belichick sustainably. I think that was a little bit more so on the Patriots just being ineffective in that spot. And then, of course, you go back to last week. I mean, Lamar Jackson and the boys had an absolute grip on that game before really melting it. And I mean, you rarely see this in football like that, particularly at the professional level. You see it a little more now. Younger guys, different generation, different mentality. Also, refs call the game differently. Also, scheme is different. We were talking about this yesterday off the record, but the fact that they go for it so frequently on 4th down, it creates so much variance in the game. You're getting 0s and 7s more than you're getting 3s. So you're getting crazy, crazy variance. And, ultimately, I think the Ravens lost their way in that 4th quarter. They thought they had it won. They let off. They couldn't bring it back. Lamar Jackson looked really deflated trying to turn it back up on the final possession. Ultimately, it stands for what it is. It was a win, but it was a crazy, crazy backdoor. I don't know if we can really categorize that as Miami being necessarily better than the Ravens. I think it was Ravens demolishing them and then saying the game's over and letting off the pedal. You come back home here and, you find essentially what seems to be Josh Allen and these guys just absolutely on it at all points in time. And I do think it's important to go back to last year and look at what they did in Miami, 35-0. This team seems to be unaffected by the heat. And I think Miami could get their quality checked here. I think they're a little bit too hot. But as you said, it's a short line. Buffalo in a bit of a funky travel spot. Buffalo does get at Baltimore next week. In the second leg of a back-to-back sequence. It's going to be tough. This is going to be a great game to watch. As you guys can tell, we don't really have a solid lean on this game. This really could go either way here. And that's important to know. You don't have to bet every game. And unfortunately, one of the reasons why books make so much money is because people want to bet the games they want to watch. And just from a psychological element yourself, you want to watch the most entertaining game. Why is the game the most entertaining? It's the two top teams. It's the sharpest graded. It's high scoring, and it's back and forth. The whole point is you don't really have an edge on that game. Just remember that if you want to watch the game, you probably don't want to bet the game. And staying course with that, let's go 4 o'clock. Games you might not want to bet. We'll talk about one, and then Guns is going to drop an official in Arizona. However, let's go to the Pacific Northwest. Seattle Seahawks hosting Falcons. Seahawks obviously coming in here off an obliteration in the road within a division at San Francisco, which you had correctly last week. Come home and catch a Falcons team who is 2-0 ATS off an egregious backdoor last week in LA. Mariota, the boys traveling north, stayed out west this week. Guns, picks, comments.
Yeah, I mean, they've been out west all week. You have this Falcons team that, at the very least, I know it was a backdoor last week where we had the Rams, but this team can stay competitive with virtually anyone. The last 2 weeks, they had to go play the Saints, losing in dramatic fashion on that game, and then they go and they play a close one with the Rams. Now they got to go on the road. They got to go play in Seattle, not the easiest place to play. But with Seattle, I just haven't seen anything out of this team whatsoever. Even in their win against the Denver Broncos with Russ coming home to Seattle, I think that they got dominated in the yardage in that game. And then the 49ers, they back it up, go on the road to go face the 49ers with Jimmy G, who is now the quarterback after the perennial darling draft pick goes out and hurts himself, which is, tragic and altogether. But Jimmy G's in there. They know how to win with him. So Seattle coming home, short line on this one, which just tells you it's going to be another one of those competitive games where, the Falcons basically play to the level of their competition. It could go either way, in my opinion. The total's really low on this one as well. It's just nothing that I ever want to mess with. It's two lackluster teams that, they're better spots on the road when you can catch them at like a heavy dog or something like that, especially the Falcons for that matter. So this is a game that I just have no interest in, and I just pass altogether. No leans.
Yeah, no, I'm chuckling because I just laughed at this game. I mean, this game is just
it's so bad.
horrible. And our guy Sammy Calmer says sharp money on the Falcons. When you look at the Falcons, I don't know. I mean, you see what happened against when the Seahawks hosted the Broncos outside the division in week 1. Seahawks did cover the game. Of course, we'll say it yet again. The Broncos seem to have forgotten how to play efficient NFL football in almost every facet of the game. So I think that was much more on Denver being highly lackluster than Seattle actually being decent to above average against the spread. Backing Geno Smith is obviously just a terrible, terrible idea. Marcus Mariota does have more upside. Again, the travel on the West Coast, I think, is interesting. I had said this when I talked to Jay Money live on Thursday, but sometimes when you stay on the West Coast, you lose your edge because it's like being on vacation. This is not a championship team. This team is not going to the playoffs. They just backdoored the Rams in LA. Now they're hanging out in hotels on the West Coast. There's off days in there for sure. These guys are hanging out. And that doesn't mean they're out in the nightclubs till 4 a.m, but they're hanging out. Dinners, they're probably out. There's probably women out there. They're on vacation. They don't have their facility. They didn't go home. Remember, almost every single back-to-back road environment in the NFL outside of an Eastern team on the West Coast, they do go back to their facility for at least 4 or 5 days. So this is a very unique environment, and I think it becomes a bit of a vacation specifically for a young team like the Falcons. This is not the 2011 New England Patriots on the West Coast with Belichick up their ass at all points in time. So right. I do think the sharp money is there, but I do think psychologically this could be a funky back-to-back spot for the Falcons. Next play, Guns picks, an official. Arizona Cardinals come home. Divisional battle, revenge game, 34-11 wild card round at LA Rams. Insulted a team that has been awful at home in the last 5 to 6 games. Will they bounce back here? Will the Rams bounce back off an 0-2 start ATS at home to start the season?
So, I mean, it hits the divisional dog system 25, 6-1. I keep reiterating a lot of home dogs playing a divisional opponent this week. So there's a lot of great spots in that regard. But now you have Arizona coming off a big win against the Las Vegas Raiders, 29-23 in OT. Dramatic comeback, plus 89 net yards for the game. So they won in all facets. Now you have the LA Rams. Now they're 1-1, 0-2 against the spread in a lackluster win over the Atlanta Falcons, 31-27, backdoor, of course, and losing to Buffalo in week 1, 31-10. In the Atlanta game, though, you got to look at the situation why we took the Rams. They had extra rest. It was a home field in their second week in a row after a bad loss. It was one of those spots that you had to take the Rams, and they only won by 4. So I kind of circled that in my mind. Is this team really that good, or are they just having what would I consider a Bengals style hangover? It's a revenge spot for Arizona. You did mention that, Shark. The last time they played each other was in the playoffs, and the Rams smacked them 34-11 on the road as 3-point dogs. Now they're sitting here at +4 at home, off a big win. I think that excitement and that momentum carries over here. The Rams are very one-dimensional. So they have to rely on Matt Stafford to throw the ball. And, he's got some sort of issues, whether it's his arm or his shoulder or something like that, because the ball's not fluttering like it used to. But they're very one-dimensional, only 2.7 yards per carry on the ground. So if you got a team that's one-dimensional, you kind of already know how to set up your defense for them. It's a revenge spot for the Cardinals. They're a dog versus a divisional opponent. I got to take them here. I bought them early on Monday, +4. I don't know if the line still sticks. If it's +3, +3.5, I'd probably still take it. If it goes below the 3, though, I'd probably pass. But I got it at +4. I like it at that number.
Yeah. I mean, again, this is tough. This team, as I mentioned, started the season last year 7-0. I think people were incredibly high. And, of course, they almost beat Aaron Rodgers at home last year. And then it seemed to really kind of flip at that point in time. For whatever reason, I'm not entirely sure. I made the comment before, Cliff Kingsbury coming over here from the Big 12. I think that was obviously a surprise hire. But it was very much centered around the fact that Cliff Kingsbury apparently had a relationship with Kyler Murray dating back to high school and wanted to have him on his collegiate team, never got to do it. The Arizona Cardinals owner, GM, their whole group got together and basically said, oh, okay, so you guys are a duo. We have to bring both in at the same time. And that's why he's there, ultimately. He's definitely there specifically for this quarterback. Started off great, but again, that was a scheme the NFL hadn't seen. So when the NFL gets tape, all of a sudden they make adjustments, you're bottled up. And I mean, you've seen what Arizona has done the first 2 weeks of the season. I mean, they got absolutely smacked by Kansas City. And then last week they were getting utterly hammered. And I mean, this wasn't really scheme driven. I mean, Josh McDaniels and the boys had them on lockdown. Kyler Murray took over the game. There's just no way around it. And I mean, the guy's a superstar. We talked about this last week. Enigmatic personality. Obviously, the writing in his contract mandating he watches film is bizarre. It doesn't happen very often. It speaks to not necessarily a lackadaisical mentality, but maybe an arrogant mentality, just that I know more, I know better. I don't have to do, the menial groundwork that every other quarterback has to do. But when you go back to last year, I do think it is noteworthy. The last handful of games that Arizona played at home last year, they did lose to the Rams 30-23 after hammering them 37-20 on the road prior. So you do get a double revenge game. However, I do look at this, and of course, Gunn, we always talk about this, conversation wins. I don't love Arizona here. I do think the Rams coming out flat at home, 0-2 ATS, could flip on the road. And I think, again, when you go back to these games, the last handful of games for Arizona at home, Sunday, November 14th, week 10, 34-10 loss. Monday, December 13th, Rams, 30-23 loss. Christmas Day, Saturday night, Indianapolis, 22-16 loss. Week 18, Seattle, 38-30 loss. There's 2 divisional losses in there. And, of course, they did open the season with another loss to Kansas City. I don't love this game. I do think there's definitely a counterpoint to the Rams. Of course, as we said, conversation wins, and let's fucking dominate. Last game on the card, we're going late night here, 8:20 p.m. We're going to Denver. And you guys know how I feel about Denver. They've cost us money, but more so than just money, they're very, very unprofessional to a point of complete, utter confusion. Guns, you get Jimmy Garoppolo and the boys coming in here for the late night game. Of course, this game does kick off at 7:20 Mountain Time. I believe, or 6:20 Mountain Time. Actually, it's a very funky kickoff start. I lean San Francisco here. I don't know if that's recency bias getting me by the head because obviously Denver has burned us twice. Theoretically, they should turn up at some point. I don't know if it's going to come here. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think it's 49ers or pass on this one because I mean, what we've seen out of Denver is like it's clock man. It's just stuff that's basic to a head coach. You don't know anything about clock management. You don't know how many timeouts you have. I mean, then what are you doing on the sideline? You have Russell Wilson basically telling his team to call out pass or run. I don't know what that stuff is about. I go, is that high school shit or is this a professional team? I don't really know. It just seems like the team is really mismanaged right now. And they're all out of sorts. I mean, they played a Texans team at home, the inaugural home game with Russell Wilson as the premier guy in this first home game, and they basically laid an egg, in my opinion, and they're lucky to come out there with a W. But with this 49ers team, hey, they're all highs of high right now. They got Jimmy. They lose their quarterback, but it didn't phase them because they had Jimmy G. I think the team is a little bit more comfortable working with him than they are working with the latter here. So I think this team is going to be set all okay in this situation. And it's just with the Broncos, it's just not a team I'm going to be backing at any point this season unless I see some improvement as far as the coaching is concerned, the personnel, and also the offensive production. Listen, I don't know why they spent so much money on Russell Wilson. It's like you get a guy not at the peak of his career. You got him on the downside of his career, and you just spent a ton of money to get him where I don't think he has it anymore. And I don't know why he was so successful with the Seahawks, and you can't transition that with the Broncos. But I mean, listen, this team is lackluster at best. They're playing at prime time. I would lean 49ers here on the short line. I think it's -1, -1.5. That's the only way to go with this. It's 49ers or pass.
Yeah, and I think people quickly forget, time flies in this life to a degree. I mean, when Russell Wilson came up, you remember Matt Flynn was supposed to be the quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
The Seahawks had pulled him over from the Packers at that point in time and given him, I believe, a $20 million contract. That did not work out particularly well because Russell Wilson, obviously coming out of, I believe, Wisconsin via NC State, a transfer product, he won the job. He's charismatic. He's got great energy. He's incredibly quick, obviously. He throws a decent ball. I wouldn't say he throws a great ball. I mean, of course, at his height, it's hard to get the ball over the line with really the up to down arc. It's got to kind of come up and around a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people quickly forget, though, that was 8 to 9 years ago. This is not yesterday. And I mean, in my mind, that Super Bowl against Peyton Manning seems like it was yesterday at Giant Stadium. That was in the spring of 2015, I believe, or maybe even 2014. It's a long time ago. Most guys don't have the shelf life that Tom Brady does or Aaron Rodgers, particularly guys that really did function with their legs as one of their big asset points. And of course, you go back to those Seahawks teams, they always had a great run game. They had an innovative scheme and they had a great defense. Denver has a very above average defense. Their run game so far is just being mismanaged. I think they have some players, but I think it's just purely schematic deficiency. But I do think, again, Russell Wilson maybe wasn't as amazing as people think, where he can just transfer franchises and just become the guy that completely reinvents your franchise at this point in his career. So I think there's a lot going on there. And I think this is definitely a potential team that could completely crater off the grid. And of course, Jimmy Garoppolo coming in here, honestly, crazy to say he's a backup. He's not a backup. He's a Super Bowl quarterback in the prime of his career. I mean, he should ball out here tonight. So I think the lean would be San Francisco. It's public, but sometimes the public, of course, does win. Final play, we're just going to hit this one in before we get out of here. 405 SoFi Stadium, Inglewood, California. Chargers come in here. The line opened at 7. The total was way higher than it is now. Now it's 42.5. Justin Herbert is a big unknown. Of course, he got hammered in the fourth quarter, going back to Thursday night 2 weeks ago in Kansas City. He's in pain. He might get injected. The line is moving from 7 to 3.5. This is ambiguous, hard to predict, and very difficult stuff. Guns, a couple comments on this one?
I mean, yeah. I mean, the Jaguars coming off a good home win, going on the road, got to go play the Chargers, and then you have a questionable game time decision in Justin Herbert. It's really hard to, the line did creep down because of that, and I even if they do inject him and he does play, I don't think you're going to get 100% Herbert on this one. And it's just one of those games that are so difficult to cap, and especially in the NFL with the lines are the sharpest. This line, you don't know what to do until you know if Herbert's going to play or not. And, you got Herbert and the Chargers coming off a loss, divisional loss, heartbreaking one, in a situation where they usually beat Kansas City on the road, and they didn't this time. And then they have to go back home, and they got to go play the Jaguars. And I know the Jaguars are an improved franchise. They've actually looked reasonably well in the first 2 weeks of the season, not like your old school Jacksonville Jaguars. They may come out and give the Chargers here a competitive game. I just don't know what direction this game is going to go. Are you going to get a pissed off Chargers team off a loss, and then a lackluster performance from the Jaguars? That could potentially happen, but I don't know if Herbert's going to play, and I don't want anything to do with the backup. So I'm just going to let that game slide right on by, and I'll focus on the games that I got cash on. So
yeah, I agree. And really, when you look at this card, the two games that just lack any sort of insider access really are this one, and of course the Falcons game at the Seahawks. Those games are just sketchy rosters, inconsistencies, teams with a lot of unknowns, just not what you want to gamble on. But what you want to put your money on today, top 4 plays for me: Minnesota Vikings live at 1:00, -6 unit. Chicago Bears, bear down Chicago, stand the fuck up at Soldier Field, catching the Texans in a brutal spot, -2.5, 1 unit. Indianapolis Colts, as posted on Monday night, +7, +5.5, brutal spot for Kansas City. Definitely a deceiving spot for the Colts, who are far better than they've shown in weeks 1 and 2. And the 2-unit special, Carolina Panthers, 0-2, 0-2 ATS, 2 tight losses, catching Jameis on the road. Buy spot in Carolina today. We're at +3, 2 units. The Gun alignment at Minnesota -6. Cincinnati Bengals on the road -5. We are also on that as the 5th play in the Circa Millions competition. I'm not officially on it. Of course, as I mentioned before, we need 5 plays. It doesn't mean we always play all of them personally. New England, the buy hat is on. The buy jersey is on. It's all going down. Home game 1, Mac Jones against Lamar Jackson, +2.5. Indianapolis Colts, +6.5, 5.5, 1 unit. Green Bay on the road. Will Aaron Rodgers ever stand up in Florida, +102, and Arizona Cardinals, +4 in the desert, State Farm Stadium at 425 Fox. 11:10 a.m. Eastern, the Shark and the Gun, Circa Millions, the show 2022. It is NFL Week 3. It is 7-point sharp Sunday, an opportunity to dominate. Guns picks, words, hype, analysis, love, and respect. A pleasure working with you. We will be back next Sunday with the Odds Fellow. Have a great day, everybody. Let's go.
Yeah, please check us out. I appreciate everybody in the comments sending all the insight on this one. I thought it was interesting that they put Hackett had to hire a game day decision guy. Sam brought that up in the chat, which is just ridiculous to me, but I had to mention that one. But thanks for joining us. If you have any other comments, hit me up in the DMs. I can give you my insight on that, or you can even DM the Shark as well. We want to engage with you folks, and thank you for joining us. We'll be here next time, 10 a.m. every Sunday throughout the football season, Circa Millions contest. And also check us out for college football, 9 p.m. Eastern time on Fridays, where we break down the college football slate as well. Let's cash some tickets, boys. Let's win some money. And as always, let's keep dancing.